UPMC Memorial. Active threat.
Ortiz says if anyone comes in, I will kill them.
We saw the worst of humanity.
One of his family members has been shot.
But we also saw the best of humanity.
Officer Duarte gave his life saving my colleagues and the nurses in the ICU that day.
This was one of those ones that we know people still had a lot of questions about, and today we're able to answer more of those questions.
This is really interesting. This is something that we have not always had access to.
The coroner contacted Ortiz's brother. He last spoke to his brother the morning of the incident. He just knew that something was wrong with his brother.
I want him to be remembered as a hero. That's what he was.
Chief Millsaps did not leave his side. They stood guard of the body the entire night.
There is a hole that will never be filled.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Metz.
And I'm Meredith Jorgensen, and we're doing this for the first time. This is a sit-down conversation that Sarah and I are having. We're both reporters here at WGAL. We're desk mates even. We sit next to each other, and we talk a lot, even in just the newsroom, about the stories that we're covering during the day and as the weeks go on. And this is a story and a conversation that has been unfolding for more than a year. Why don't you tell them a little bit about the story that we're going to focus on today?
Yeah, so we're going to talk about the UPMC shooting, the UPMC Memorial Hospital shooting, specifically back in February of 2025. And the reason why we're talking about it today is because of this little thing called the Coroner's Act. And what that means is the Coroner's Act requires coroner's offices in certain counties, which is actually, I have it written down just to refer to, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th classes. They have 30 days from the end of a year to then submit their coroner's reports for public record. So the reason why we're bringing this up today is because we had the York County coroner submit their coroner's reports, and I took a field trip and I read through a lot of coroner's reports, and this was one of those ones that we know people still had a lot of questions about, and today we're able to answer more of those questions.
And to give some perspective, when something like this happens, this was obviously such a big case, we request so many documents. We're looking for so much information when an incident of this magnitude happens in our community. And some of those documents are public information right from the beginning. Some of them are not. There are right to know requests and open record laws that Sarah is really well versed in, and we're always trying to make sure, for the good of the community and for the information that we think the public should have in an incident of this magnitude, that we can get all of that information, mainly so that if something like this, God forbid, happens again, we can learn from it and find out what the systems and the protocols were in place, and if there are any changes that need to happen, maybe if, again, God forbid, something like this happens again. The difference with the coroner's reports is that they were not available immediately. So it takes the whole calendar year to come and close before Sarah could access them. So when that year closed, then we were finally able to get our hands on them. And by we, I mean Sarah. And Sarah has really been diving into them. And the beauty about this conversation is that while we all in the newsroom were really delving into this case and covering it for the days, weeks, and months afterwards, and the memorials that have continued for Officer Andrew Duarte, who died in the line of fire in this incident. The coroner's reports themselves, I have not had a chance to look at them. So Sarah has delved into them, and today we're going to find out a little bit, I'm going to find out for the first time too, a little bit about what was in them. So this is sort of a discovery process for you as the viewers and for me at the same time. So Sarah, what should we do now? Do you want to just explain a little bit about what is available, or should we go back and just remind people a little bit about the situation?
Let's go back. Let's talk about UPMC Memorial.
Just to remind people, I think.
Yes. This happened on February 22nd of 2025. Police say that a distraught man entered the hospital and held staff hostage before then shooting at multiple people and injuring multiple people. 2 people died that day, one of them being Officer Andrew Duarte with West York Borough Police Department, and then also the shooter, Diogenes Archangel-Ortiz, died that day as well.
So we should do a little bit of the narrative as well, because when Diogenes Archangel-Ortiz went into the hospital, he took some of the staff hostage. He zip-tied some of the nurses. A physician who had been treating his girlfriend, I believe, right, or earlier, had tried to go and calm him down. But he was in such a state that police believe that he had come with the intention of, he brought the gun with him, he brought the zip ties with him. So there was going to be a situation that day. And when multiple 911 calls were made, they were saying that he wanted them to take him to the place where the people were, meaning the police officers.
Yes. So in the coroner's report, you have to remember, this is just the coroner's point of view, the coroner's background information. This is not a police report. This is coming from the coroner. But for this report, it was very imperative. You could tell that the coroner needed to know more background about Diogenes Archangel-Ortiz. So I do want to talk about the background of him and kind of what I learned that day, or what I learned leading up to that day, and kind of how it unfolded. Okay. So Diogenes Archangel-Ortiz, we're learning through the coroner's report that he had a girlfriend who had HIV and AIDS. She was also diagnosed with pneumonia as a complication of her HIV and AIDS. So Ortiz and the girlfriend, they were trying to treat HIV and AIDS with herbal remedies. And we learn in the coroner's report that they didn't believe in modern medicine. Mm-hmm. So that's why they were trying to treat her with herbal remedies and at-home things. However, she was getting very, very ill, and they did have to go into the doctor's office. So they went, and it wasn't good from there. They basically said that she was dying. So on 2/17, so February 17th, she went into cardiac arrest, according to the coroner's report. She then was resuscitated, but she remained on a ventilator before being pronounced brain dead a few days later. That happened on February 21st. She was pronounced brain dead. At this moment, families have to make a decision, and it does not mention her family in the coroner's report. It only mentions Diogenes Archangel-Ortiz. He was at her doctor's appointments with her, during this time, cardiac arrest. He got to know the doctors that were treating her. So on 2/21, he got this news that his girlfriend is now brain dead. Her cardiac death then happened at 2:22, around 2 a.m. That is the hospital shooting day. 2 a.m., she dies. Hospital staff in the coroner's report make note that they cannot get a hold of Diogenes Archangel-Ortiz that day. They say that they're calling him overnight. Again, this is happening at 2 a.m., so they're trying to get a hold of Diogenes, and they cannot. He's not answering the phone, so they never get a hold of him, and they leave messages. We know then at 10:30 the next morning, so 8 hours after her death, Diogenes Archangel-Ortiz shows up at the hospital. And that's kind of setting the scene.
It's unbelievable when you realize perhaps the days that lead up to this, what was happening with his loved one. And he has a relationship with some of the nurses who are there. We understand that they knew who he was by him coming in and visiting her and going to the doctor's appointments. And then when he comes in on that morning, there is a physician who is familiar with him. And actually, a nurse says he's feeling agitated and brings him into is it an empty patient treatment room or something like that, and says, let me see if I can calm you down. And
well, they also have to make sure that he got the message that his girlfriend died. So this physician who knows him sees that he's agitated, and also the coroner's report says wanted a private room to make sure that that message was clear. So they do go into that private room, and there's no calming him down, according to the coroner who talked to this physician.
So you're getting a little bit more of the idea of the state of mind and the situation. And what happens then?
So the physician tried calming him down, but couldn't. So the physician, for their safety and, just to kind of step away for a second, actually does step away for a second, leaves the room, and at which point the coroner's report says the physician turns back around and he just sees Diogenes Archangel-Ortiz with a gun. At that moment, the physician knows how this is going to unfold, and the physician tried getting away. Ortiz, that is the first time we're told that Ortiz then opens fire and hits the physician. So he does have a superficial wound at this point, but we're told he was able to retreat to safety. But again, a gunshot went off in the hospital.
This is when it really changes from a man who's visiting the hospital to a real, obviously, safety issue.
Exactly. Again, that happened around 10:40, I would say. According to the report, 10:40-ish. Ortiz then, after firing this round outside of that room that he was in privately, towards the physician, he then walks towards the nurse's station and fires a few more shots. So staffers know what's going on at this point. I'm sure emergency buttons were pushed, and that's kind of when they're able to notify other people that there is an emergency happening in the hospital. They do say, in the coroner's report, they do say some staffers at this point, after Ortiz went to the nurse's station, they were quote unquote collected and taken back to that same empty patient room that Diogenes learned his girlfriend was dead in. So he took them back into that room, and again, you mentioned before with the zip ties, and held them hostage. So we do have the staffers now in this room with Diogenes Archangel-Ortiz. Some of them are zip tied, some of them are just being held hostage. He did have them down on the floor, and it said in the coroner's report that he barricaded them into the room so they couldn't get out. It is believed also that Diogenes Archangel-Ortiz did not get these zip ties or anything gun-wise from the hospital. They believe he walked in with those things already.
Which shows just a little bit of premeditation, that obviously he showed up with those. And it bears to note, Sarah, that this is information that's coming from a coroner's report, an actual document, part of an investigative process.
Yes.
At the time that this happened, and it bodes to some of the reason that we're having this conversation and having it now, because these are real investigative documents. At the time, we were going through Facebook posts of people who were in the hospital at the time who were saying, this is what happened. My mom is a nurse in the hospital. My wife was zip tied. And we were getting bits and pieces of this story of what was happening inside this ward at the time. But again, they were often secondhand, thirdhand, on Facebook, not totally verifiable. We as a newsroom were reaching out repeatedly to try to make contact with those people. We totally understand that at the time, those people were in the middle of real trauma and understood that they were not ready to talk. But this is a time when we're putting the pieces together of all of the storylines. We're pulling on all of those threads and really getting a true narrative of exactly what's happening. And when it comes together in this coroner's report, it really kind of fine-tunes the conversation, even though it's a year after this. So some of the people might wonder, like, why is it a year after that we're sitting down and having this in-depth conversation? But for the people who were a part of this and still live with the trauma of this, it's important to know that
and
what
who haven't
happened,
been able to talk about it.
and still haven't, for a variety of reasons that they haven't been able to share their story. That for the people who are really interested in this, they might want to sit and listen to this conversation and hear the official, reports from this. So I think that's important. For us, we didn't forget about this, and a lot of people haven't forgotten about this. So we want to continue to have this in-depth portion of the story. So from the coroner's report, what when it escalates when the first responders arrive, what happens then? Tell us a little bit more about that portion of the story.
So the coroner's report says the initial call to 911 came in at 10:43.
Okay.
So again,
and multiple 911 calls.
Multiple.
A lot of people in the unit called, and so the emergency response community knew that something was happening.
Yes, and this is only about 3 minutes after he arrived to the hospital, 3-ish, maybe 5 minutes, because they said he got there, they believe, between 10:35 and 10:40. So initial 911 calls come in immediately after those shots are fired.
People are moving.
numerous individuals call 911, and in the background of one of those phone calls, it is clear to the coroner's report that Ortiz says, if anyone comes in, I will kill them. And that's from the barricaded room. So while he had these staffers zip tied, one of them potentially could have made a call to 911, and that's when that was heard. So at this point, police now know kind of the situation that they're walking into. A man with a gun, a man distraught, a man who has staffers held hostage, and if anyone enters that room, it's not going to be a good scene. So what I found interesting in the coroner's report is it gives you the video surveillance perspective. The coroner was not there for this situation, clearly. The coroner gets called after a death happens. So this is all the coroner's perspective from watching the video surveillance.
Which we have never seen, we have requested, and we have been denied.
Exactly. And I'm gonna pick it up, actually, I wrote it down word for word, what they saw, just so we could kind of
Okay, what does it say?
picture it. The debris field of the incident extends from the front of the ICU to the far end of the hallway, around the corner to a small corridor that leads to the Zen room. So if you've ever been to UPMC Memorial Hospital, there is a Zen room, and this all kind of unfolded outside of the Zen room. So there are areas in the hallways in and around the ICU that contain evidence markers when the coroner gets there, and empty casings, numerous firearms, blood smears in the hallway leading up to the Zen room. And it was also noted that numerous items of police uniforms were found on the ground as well. So
you can imagine this is the scene afterwards. When something calms down and all the people have left, this is what the coroner is able to see afterwards.
Exactly. So from the video surveillance shows Ortiz and one female hostage coming out of the double doors to the entrance of the ICU.
Okay.
So
they're leaving the unit and coming through.
Ortiz takes them out of that private room, goes through the double doors.
Okay.
Numerous police officers are then on the other side of those doors in the hallway.
Okay.
They are appearing to prepare for a breach. And again, that's quoted from the coroner's report.
Okay.
They're preparing to breach the ICU.
Okay.
At this moment, Ortiz is then seen exiting those double doors with the hostage, and police then open fire because they have eyes on Ortiz at that time and they believe he's the shooter.
While he has the hostage.
While he has the hostage.
So they were going to breach the double doors and go in because that's where Archangel Ortiz is.
Yes.
But then he actually comes out before then, and that's when the shooting starts.
Yes. So, I mean, as you can imagine, this is a chaotic scene. They're just like you said, they're prepared to go in and they have a plan for when they go in. But the second something changes, like Ortiz is now coming out, the plan, not that it gets scrapped, but it becomes more difficult. So police then open fire with visible impact on Ortiz. We can only presume that that means he goes down. Ortiz's upper torso is then causing, or there's visible impact on Ortiz's upper torso, so potentially a bullet hole. And then him and the hostage fall to the ground. So he's still holding on to the hostage at this point. The coroner's report says he then tries to get back up after being shot, and he was shot many more times. Now, the female hostage in this situation, it's remarkable that police were able to hit their target and not hit the female hostage, because she actually, in the coroner's report, remained low to the ground. So as Ortiz went to stand back up, she got lower, and I believe that's how they were able to then take a shot again on Ortiz. So she stayed low and she did not get injured in that incident. I mean, it's just remarkable. After he was shot again, he did remain down with no resuscitation efforts. Now, to go back, that's just the video surveillance. So then moving forward, the coroner arrives eventually, and then that's what they see, the blood smears leading up to the Zen room and all of that. Now the coroner, when it comes to Ortiz's body, they found Ortiz lying face down in one of the entrances to the ICU in a doorway area. So the shooting happened as soon as he walked through the door. Upon removing his hat, so we didn't know he had a hat on, he did have a large ballistic wound to the rear of his head, so we believe he was shot in the back of the head. He also had a bullet wound on his chest and very large lacerations. He also had his arms behind his back when the coroner arrived. They appeared as though they were handcuffed, but they weren't. They were just behind his back. However, they did note that there were a loose pair of handcuffs lying next to him. So I'm sure when someone walked over to him, they realized he was dead and they didn't handcuff him, but they put down their handcuffs just in case. It was also noted in the coroner's report that 4.5 hours after the initial alert was received, the coroner laid eyes on Ortiz. So it took 4.5 hours for the coroner to actually declare Ortiz dead.
It's interesting, in the chaos of the situation, you can imagine how quickly things are moving, how quickly the situation is moving. But I guess when the threat has been neutralized, thank you, then it sort of slows down. So to imagine that it's 4.5 hours until the coroner actually gets into the building and declares Archangel Ortiz dead and actually sees the body for himself. It seems like a long stretch of time. I don't know if that's typical, but it seems like a long
Well,
amount
it
of time.
does. And also you have to remember, police at this point, they don't know if he's with someone else. I mean, that is part of that investigation that is happening. Yes, they neutralized him, but is there someone else? So they were asking those questions. They were trying to vet those answers before they allowed anyone to step foot into that hospital. I mean, it was on a total lockdown for hours. One other thing that I did want to mention just about Ortiz, the coroner contacted Ortiz's brother to try and get more information. That's how he learned that Ortiz and his girlfriend did not believe in modern medicine or even Western medicine. I forgot to mention that as well. But he said he last spoke to his brother the morning of the incident.
Okay.
And he felt something was going to happen. However, he said, he made it very clear, he did not know it was going to be to this extent. He just knew that something was wrong with his brother. And he assumed it was just that he was upset about his girlfriend being in the hospital, and to what that looked like. You know, it wasn't clear at that point if he knew she was dead or not, but the brother did make note that he spoke to him before the shooting and he could feel something was wrong. So
How could you know that it would unfold to this extent just hours later?
right.
It's interesting, too, that the coroner's report includes reaching out to other family members and including that in the investigation and in the report.
It does. What I also want to talk about is Officer Andrew Duarte, because he also lost his life in this shooting. This was very eye-opening for me, this coroner's report.
How come?
The way that it is written and the way that I read it, it is so interesting because it's a side that we don't see often.
Okay.
So yes, it talks about the coroner arriving to the scene and seeing Ortiz and kind of how that happens, but it talks about how they took his body from UPMC Memorial Hospital to Wellspan, and then what it looks like from that point forward, which is something that we don't get to hear about. I mean, when a law enforcement officer dies, it's so tragic, and we hear how they die and how it happened, but we don't hear how impactful it is for even the hospital staff and the department. So for me, this was just very eye-opening because it's something that, one, we didn't ask questions about, and we also didn't hear about it. So we knew that Officer Andrew Duarte was loved and cared for, and he was a great person and a respectful law enforcement officer, but to see it, or not even to see it, I mean, I'm reading it, but to read it and how people treated him after his death is just impactful.
You're right. This is a unique slice of time that is not available to the public at all, any member of the public or the media, nonetheless. But how interesting, again, that it's included in this coroner's report. And these are the medical professionals, the law enforcement professionals who are tasked. This is their job. This is the time that their job is the most important after a law enforcement member's death. And it also goes to show how different the protocols are, perhaps, for Archangel-Ortiz, who the coroner didn't see for 4.5 hours, and then for the member of law enforcement, and the respect that is given to a member of law enforcement who dies in a situation like this.
Yeah.
What can you tell us?
So at 12:30 on February 22nd, the coroner received a call on the death reporting line, and that's from WellSpan York Hospital. So at 12:30, that's 2 hours after that initial shooting.
From the hospital where they brought Andrew Duarte
Yes.
from UPMC to WellSpan.
To WellSpan. And he's in the trauma bay still at this moment. So they receive a call saying that there is a reported death. The coroner was informed that it was Officer Andrew Duarte, and he was involved in an active shooting and hostage situation over at UPMC. So the scene is very clear at this point. The coroner also noted when they arrived to WellSpan, that hospital also was on a total lockdown because of the situation.
They weren't sure if there would be more victims to come. They weren't sure if there might be a similar situation at other hospitals. I mean, it was locked down for miles around.
Yes. So the coroner arrives to the hospital, and there are several officers in the atrium from multiple departments, including West York Borough. Another one mentioned is West Manchester Township. And the reason why I mentioned that one is because one of the officers, Officer Colin Garrett, he was waiting for the coroner to arrive, and he, as soon as they did arrive, he spoke to them and said he wanted to coordinate with Duarte, or when Duarte would be then taken out of the trauma bay, so that they could make sure that they placed an American flag over his body anytime he was being transported. So after he was reported dead, they wanted to make sure that they dressed him in that American flag, and that was from the West Manchester Township Police Department. So that already, I mean, it speaks volumes to the community in York, I believe, and the police departments there as well. And another thing that I thought was interesting is Chief Millsaps is in the trauma bay, and he's already talking to the chief deputy coroner who's there. So the way that this works is...
And this is the chief of Andrew Duarte, his actual police chief of the West York Borough Police Department, so he's lost an officer at this point.
Yes, and he is already speaking to the chief deputy coroner who is already there. So this deputy coroner is arriving because they're the one taking the report. The chief deputy coroner got the call and was there immediately. So they're already having conversations about what happened and how it happened and what that looks like. Millsaps also asked at this point, Chief Millsaps, if Nancy Duarte, Andrew's mother, and his family could see him, like have a private viewing inside the hospital. So, and this had to happen after the coroner was finished. The coroner still has to announce him dead and take their report. So the coroner's office does that. They want to work fast and efficiently, but also take their time because this is a law enforcement officer. So they walk in, and we're going to talk about Officer Andrew Duarte's injuries at this point, and just to kind of give an overall picture, and then we'll go back to the scene after his body was moved.
And I just want to say at this point, for me, I have had the day of the shooting. As we do when something like this happens, we try to cover all the bases. And my assignment that day was to see if we could find, and maybe this was the day after, to see if we could talk to some members of Andrew Duarte's family. So we do our digging and we find his mom's name and her home address. And I was sent to her house, and I knocked on the door, which is difficult as a journalist. But that was the task at hand. And Nancy Duarte answered the door. And in all of my time as 25 years as a journalist, I have never been as awestruck by a loved one's response as I have been by Nancy Duarte's in the wake of her grief of her son. She invited me in the house, as she had several other journalists that day. And I sat down with her, and she told me about her son, because she wanted people to know who her son was in day one. It was an emotional conversation, and I have kept up a little bit of a relationship with her. And I am so grateful and appreciative to Nancy for that. It is really hard for her. And this is really hard for her. And I'm sure this conversation will be a little bit hard for her. And I'm empathetic to Nancy about that. But these are this is the nitty gritty that we learn when some of this stuff is happening. But it also is a little bit of the grace that people gave her son in those really terrible moments. How chaotic and crazy it was in those instant minutes, those immediate moments, and then how everything slowed down. And really, they gave her son the time and respect that he deserved for him giving the ultimate sacrifice. So I hope that people realize that when we're sharing these things, all of that is not lost on us as human beings, as people who have the benefit of having the law enforcement system protect us as women and as citizens of the United States, and me as a friend of Nancy Duarte's. But I'm interested to just see, what was the impact of this like on Andrew Duarte and on his body, on this shooting that took his life.
Yeah, Nancy's strength is just
remarkable, and her faith. I've learned a lot from her.
I'm glad you were the first person to meet her. I did get to meet her not long after, and just everything that you said about her, spot on.
She's been so gracious with so many people. So I think there's a lot to learn. And but for the grace of God, that anybody have to lose a child. You should never have to bury a child. But she has paid this forward and taught so many people so many lessons in this. Mm-hmm. So I'm so sad that has to be done in Andrew's name. But it goes to show you that this is a tragedy. This is an absolute tragedy. This didn't have to happen at all. Archangel-Ortiz went in there and created chaos that day, and Nancy's son died because of that. But I hope that we are learning things because of that. That is the way that I think our society can get better, because of that chaos that was created that day.
Yeah, and I think Nancy would feel the same exact way. For her to ask to see his body and their family to say goodbyes, I thought was very, very brave of them, especially knowing after a chaotic shooting happened. Mm-hmm. So
you have no idea what you might see.
You really don't. Yeah. And the coroner does mention just the wounds that Duarte had, and he's lying on his back in the hospital, and he is actually covered up to his neck in now a white blanket, because the coroner is called. They know he is dead. So they see the coroner's report says they see a bullet hole in his upper left shoulder, so up in this area, and pictures are taken. They make sure that they take pictures for investigative purposes, and they do believe that a possible exit wound is seen on his chest area. So whether it went in through the shoulder and then came out through the chest, and in what capacity, they don't explain too much, but they do believe he was shot in the shoulder. And then his left arm has a very large shaped laceration that was bleeding as well. And the reason why I want to mention this one is because the coroner said it was a very large heart-shaped laceration. So I thought that was just a little, I don't know, tidbit that is just special in a way. His uniform was cut off so that they could try and render aid, and it was sitting underneath of him, and the coroner did say that he had blood coming from his ears, so they did know that he was dead at that moment, but they did try to resuscitate him and any effort possible to save his life. He was then prepared for viewing for his family. So that was the coroner's report on his body and how they had to get eyes on it and make note of what they saw and his injuries. So to prepare him for his family, they wanted to cover him up. So they did put his body in a black bag of sorts, and then they left his head out. He didn't have any injuries to his head that were noted. So they left his head out so his mom and his family and his girlfriend could get a proper goodbye. What they did from this moment forward, they also laid a American flag, I should say, over the black bag. So he had an American flag on, his head was out, and he was in a body bag. Duarte was then taken to a private room. I believe it was the CT scan room, so he could be viewed by his family. But to do that, they had nurses, the entire West York Borough Police Department, and anyone else who was from any police department in the atrium that day. They had them line the hallways. So when he was being wheeled to the CT room from the trauma bay, he was being sent off in a proper way. So I thought that was really special. Another thing that they noted is that Chief Millsaps did not leave his side. Chief Millsaps was in the atrium talking to the chief deputy coroner. He was talking to the family. He then was able to make sure that the coroner did their report, and then from that moment, Chief Millsaps did not leave his side. So they're wheeling him now from trauma bay to CT room. It says, and this is quoted from the coroner's report, several nurses and the West York Borough Police Department lined the hallways as Duarte was taken to the room for viewing. The American flag was then placed over a body bag with just Duarte's head available. Duarte's girlfriend was also at this family gathering. His family had time with Duarte. Chief Millsaps and the entire West York Borough Police Department then came in the room after the family to pay their respects as well. And I'm going to continue reading because it kind of wraps it all together. But when the viewing was done, officers were then taken back to a different room, and Duarte was going to be taken down to the morgue. Chief Millsaps and hospital staff coordinated that a guard would stand there with his body throughout the night. So they stayed there. They had
He wasn't alone.
He wasn't alone. He was there. They were there, and essentially it was a brother of his. I mean, somebody that worked with him. So they stood guard of the body outside the morgue the entire night, and then the same applied for then when he was taken to the coroner's office. They also made sure that he had a guard with him and a brother.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. I thought it was really, really interesting that Chief Millsaps didn't leave his side after finding out that one of his own went down, and the respect that they gave him in this hospital. I mean, that just speaks volumes to the Duarte family and other people who unfortunately might have to go through this or who have gone through this, and to know that he was cared for and loved by people who didn't even know him probably.
It's something a chief never wants to do. It's something certainly a mother never wants to do. It's something fellow officers never want to do. It really brings your mortality to the fore. But if, again, but for the grace of God that happens, you sort of know the protocol that you'll be cared for, even in death. This, unfortunately, and Newsday had known this shortly after the shooting itself, was a friendly fire incident. So this wasn't Archangel-Ortiz's gun discharging. We've learned since then that there were no bullets left in Archangel-Ortiz's gun. Does the coroner's report make any mention of the type of bullet that it was, what the ammunition was, that you can figure out like from where the gun came or for whose gun it came? No,
and I thought that was also interesting because usually the coroner's report does mention, just from what I've gathered through looking through other ones, especially with law enforcement officers dying in the line of duty. However, I do think something that is of note here is that under Duarte's left arm is a very large heart-shaped laceration. So what that was, whether that could have been from a shotgun, the debris from it, you know, we just don't know. It doesn't say it was a bullet hole, but it could be debris from a nearby gun. The only bullet hole that it mentions is the one that went through his shoulder and came out possibly his chest, and it does not give a size or anything of that nature.
Caliber or anything like
Yeah.
that. We do know that the state police issued a memorandum immediately after the shooting, removing all the shotguns from the cars. So we assume that that was in
light of this, possibly,
yes,
we don't know.
Yes, and I was going to say retaliation, not retaliation, in light of it. So those are the sort of maybe protocol changes or things that we have learned as a result that change, that hopefully maybe make people safer. I mean, we make no judgment, but just taking the information of they were on, they were in a hallway. It's, like
Close knit.
Yes.
The way they made it sound, they were all right there.
Difficult
and again,
situation.
And remember, they were prepared to breach. They were not prepared,
To
maybe,
have someone
to
walk
have
in.
Ortiz walk out
Yeah.
when he did in that moment. And police officers have to make very, very short notice decisions, and some of them are life or death. So.
And those quick decisions, have life and death consequences, and they did in this case both for Archangel Ortiz and for Andrew Duarte. This is fascinating. This is really interesting. This is something that we have not always had access to. News 8 has not done before, which is part of the reason for this conversation. And I learned a lot. So you've done a great job at really looking through these documents and giving us some more detailed information. And again, for the people who were part of this is part of their life, part of their story now, part of the trauma that is part of their lives moving forward. So the more information we have, and this is the information that is now part of the public record, that it is our responsibility as journalists to bring to the viewers if they are interested in having it. So thank you for diving into it and taking a real closer look.
Of course, and if you guys liked this sit-down type of conversation where you were able to learn more, let us know. I read through so many coroner's reports, and I had
You're
no
an
problem.
expert now,
I had
though,
no
and-
problem doing it, and
Yes.
especially because, like you said, if it is going to help make a change, then let's keep doing it. So
Yeah, and if there's a story or something else that you think we should dive into a little bit further, let us know about that too. This is what we're here for, and we're interested to do it. So if there's a topic that really is interesting to you, let us know, and we'd be happy to do it. Sarah and I are here for you.
yeah, we are.
Good job.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.